Ever stop to think that even like picking out your clothes for the day involves a sort of mini risk assessment? Like, is this jacket going to be too much later? Will these shoes actually be comfy if I got to walk a lot?
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You're weighing possibilities without even realizing it.
Exactly. Now, amplify that process by like 1,000, and you start to see why solid decision-making becomes so crucial when the stakes are way higher.
Absolutely. And that leads us right into what we're diving into today, risk management. We're going to be looking at it from the perspective of aviation training, but honestly, the core ideas are surprisingly applicable to pretty much anything. This isn't just about preventing plane crashes. It's about learning to think ahead and be more deliberate about how you handle potential hazards, no matter what you're doing.
Couldn't agree more. Our main source material for this deep dive, Chapter 10 of the FAA's Aviation Instructor's Handbook.
Sounds pretty niche, right?
It might seem that way at first glance, but trust me, it's packed with insights on recognizing, assessing, and dealing with risk. Basically, we're going to be your guides, extracting the practical wisdom that can benefit anyone, even if you never set foot in a cockpit.
Our mission today is to take that guidance and show you how the principles taught to flight instructors can help anyone become more risk-aware in their everyday lives.
Let's kick things off by tackling the why. Why is this even important? You know, the FAA, they've spent a lot of time analyzing accident data.
They have, and they've come to a pretty significant conclusion. A huge chunk of aviation accidents, they can be traced back to, well, how should I put it, shortcomings in risk management.
Right, not making the best choices. And while those consequences in aviation, they can be, well, dramatic is an understatement. It's not just limited to flying.
Not at all. Think about rushing to finish a project at work and missing important details, or ignoring early signs of health problems. It's the same basic idea. Bad decisions leading to negative outcomes.
You're spot on. And the thing is, after an accident, the analysis goes beyond just the immediate cause. You have organizations like the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board.
Right. Their whole job is to figure out what went wrong, what the probable cause was, and make recommendations to prevent it from happening again.
And the FAA, they have their own role. They're looking at the bigger picture. Were there problems with training, aircraft certification standards, air traffic control procedures? Often, what both of them find is the pilot's decisions leading up to the event played a huge part.
Yeah, that big picture perspective from the FAA is essential for preventing future accidents. To make this a bit more concrete, the handbook uses this example. It's called the Mooney accident.
The details of the plane itself aren't super important here. It's more about the situation. The pilot, he had a vacuum pump failure, and then he ran into IMC.
Instrument meteorological conditions, basically flying in clouds where you can't see outside.
Right, so the NTSB, their finding was pilot error due to loss of control.
Which, on the surface, makes sense.
But that's just the immediate outcome, right?
Yeah.
It tells you what happened, but not the whole story of why.
Exactly. This is where really looking into the risk management aspect it's interesting. The handbook digs deeper, and it points out that very often the root cause is inadequate planning before the flight and not properly assessing the risks involved.
It's all about understanding the layers beneath the surface, right? So how do we even start breaking down those basic risks?
Well, the handbook gives us this really handy tool. It's called the PAVE checklist. PAVE. It's an acronym, and it's meant to help you systematically think about potential hazards before you even start doing something.
It's like a mental pre-flight inspection.
I like that. So let's unpack PAVE. P stands for pilot. This goes way beyond just how skilled the pilot is or their licenses. It's also about their physical and mental state.
The handbook even mentions the IMSAFE checklist here. Illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion.
All things that can totally impact a pilot's judgment. Like imagine how fatigue could affect their reaction time or decision making, right?
That's huge. It's not just about technical skills. It's about the human factor. Are you really in a good place to handle this physically and mentally?
Exactly. Then we've got A for aircraft. This is all about the equipment. Is everything in tip-top shape? Inspections up to date?
Like in the Mooney accident, that faulty vacuum pump, that falls right under this category. Then there's V for environment.
This covers all the stuff outside the aircraft. Weather is a big one, obviously. Like the IMC, the Mooney pilot encountered.
But it's also things like terrain, the type of airspace you're in, even the lighting conditions.
Yeah. And the handbook makes a really good point here. Some environmental hazards are almost always going to be super high risk. Like imagine a VFR pilot facing a line of thunderstorms. Not good.
Nope, not good at all. And finally, we have E for external pressures. This one gets really interesting because it digs into our motivations and obligations.
Are you feeling pressured to reach your destination even if things aren't ideal? Got scheduling conflicts or personal stuff pushing you to take unnecessary risks?
It's easy to overlook those subtle influences, even when you're trying to be objective.
Oh yeah, definitely. In the Mooney accident, the pilot's desire to get where he was going could have been a big factor.
Yeah.
If we take a step back and look at the Mooney accident through this PAVE lens, we see a bunch of things lining up. You got the aircraft, the vacuum pump issue, environment, the IMC, maybe some external pressure to arrive on time, and then the pilot who, the handbook suggests, might have overestimated his ability to stay in control with those instruments acting up.
It gives you a much more complete picture than just saying loss of control, right?
Totally.
Uh,
So identifying the risks, that's step one. But once you've used something like PAVE to highlight those hazards, the next question is, how risky are they really?
right. How do you measure that?
That's where this idea of a risk assessment matrix comes in. It's a grid, basically. One side is the likelihood of something bad happening, ranging from like remote to frequent. The other side is how severe the consequences would be, from minor inconvenience all the way up to, well, the worst case scenario.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's apply that to the Mooney accident. How would you use this matrix in that situation?
All right, so let's think about it. The worst case scenario, losing control in IMC, that's catastrophic, could easily be fatal. So the severity, super high. Now, the likelihood of losing control after a vacuum pump fails, especially when you're going into IMC, it's not a sure thing, but it's definitely more than a remote possibility.
Got to be at least occasional, if not more likely.
Right. So if you put catastrophic severity and at least occasional likelihood on the matrix, you're landing in the high-risk zone, the red zone.
So it's not just about listing out problems, but also about how likely those problems are and how bad the outcome could be if they happen. It seems like there's a bit of judgment involved, though, even with this framework.
For sure. Figuring out the likelihood and severity, that can be kind of subjective, especially in the heat of the moment. But the handbook emphasizes that with experience and practice, you get better at it.
Like two people might look at a weather forecast and have totally different takes on whether it's going to rain or not.
Exactly. It's based on their past experiences, maybe even their personality. So we've used PAVE to figure out the risks. We've assessed how serious they are using the matrix. Now what? We can't just stop there.
Of course not. What's the point of knowing about danger if you don't do anything about it?
Exactly. The next critical step is taking action to manage those risks. The handbook gives us another great acronym here, TEAM.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
It stands for transfer, eliminate, accept, and mitigate. These are the 4 main ways we can handle the risks we've identified and assessed.
Team.
Oh.
Got it. So let's go through them one by one. What does transfer look like in real life?
Transferring risk basically means passing the responsibility or the potential bad outcome onto someone or something else. A classic example the handbook gives. A pilot sees bad weather coming in, high risk. So they decide to transfer that risk by, well, just buying an airline ticket instead of flying themselves.
Simple as that. How about eliminate?
Eliminate is the most straightforward. You just get rid of the hazard completely. Let's say you're planning a fun flight, but the crosswinds are too strong. Eliminating the risk might mean canceling the flight, or deciding not to practice certain maneuvers if the weather's not cooperating.
Makes sense. Then there's accept. This one's a bit tricky. Why would anyone willingly accept risk?
Accepting risk doesn't mean ignoring it. It means you're acknowledging that some level of risk is still there even after you've done everything you can to reduce it. And you've decided that the benefits of going ahead outweigh that remaining risk.
It's a calculated decision.
Exactly. Think about a flight instructor letting a student take the controls. The instructor's right there to step in if needed, but they're still consciously accepting the risk that comes with the student's lack of experience.
You've lowered the danger, but you're aware of what's still possible. And then the final piece is mitigate. This sounds like the most proactive approach.
It is. Mitigating means doing things to make the likelihood or severity of the bad outcome less, well, bad. In the Mooney example, the pilot could have chosen to land at a different airport while he still had good visibility, instead of pushing on into those cloudy conditions. That's mitigation.
So it's like flight instructors using a structured lesson plan and doing thorough briefings. That reduces the chances of the student making a mistake.
Exactly. So with TEAM, you're not just aware of the risks, you're deciding how to deal with them. Whether that's shifting them, getting rid of them entirely, accepting what's left, or taking steps to lessen the impact.
The handbook makes it clear that you should focus on the high and serious risks, those red and yellow zones. But even those medium risks, the green ones, it's worth addressing them if you can.
And remember, it's not a one and done thing. You're constantly evaluating and adjusting. It's a process.
Right, not just a pre-flight checklist. You brought up an interesting point earlier. The handbook suggests that the Mooney pilot, his inability to handle the risk in that situation, it might have been because he didn't have enough training.
Yeah. It highlights this important fact. Risk management, it's not something you're just born with. It's a skill you learn and practice.
And the handbook stresses how crucial it is to include risk management training at all levels, from the very first lessons all the way through to ongoing training for experienced pilots.
It's a building process. You start with the basics and get more complex as the pilot gains experience. The stuff you'd teach a student who's about to fly solo for the first time is going to be different from what you discuss with someone who's going for their instrument rating.
Right. As you get more experienced, you face more complex situations, so your risk management skills need to level up too. Even seasoned professionals need to keep practicing and adapting, especially when they're doing something new.
Like switching to a different type of aircraft or flying solo when you're used to having a crew.
Which leads us to the role of the flight instructor.
They play a vital role. The handbook makes it clear that instructors are always managing risk, not just for the safety of the flight, but also for the effectiveness of the learning process itself.
So it's like they're juggling two levels of risk, right? The inherent risk of flying, plus the added risk of having a less experienced person at the controls.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. The handbook even gives examples of risks that are unique to flight instruction, like a student messing up a maneuver at a low altitude, or the instructor not being familiar with a specific model of aircraft.
And it outlines these best practices for instructors, ways they proactively manage those risks.
Things like really getting to know the aircraft before teaching in it, constantly checking on your own well-being and the student's well-being, using that IMSAFE checklist we talked about, and of course, making sure the aircraft is airworthy before every flight.
And the instructor's job isn't just about managing risk alone. The handbook is big on getting the student involved in the process, especially during those dual instruction flights.
It's about building that shared responsibility for safety. The instructor should be actively asking the student, hey, what are the potential hazards here? How did you make that decision? What could we do to mitigate this risk?
So the student starts to develop their own risk management instincts.
Exactly. And the handbook also talks about specific things to consider during different phases of flight instruction, like takeoffs and landings. It emphasizes that during those critical moments, safety and effective learning have to come first. Don't try to cram in too much info.
Those high workload phases call for a sterile cockpit approach, right? Minimize distractions.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up, what's the takeaway for our listener?
The main message, I think, is that effective risk management, it's way more than just a set of rules for pilots. It's a vital skill for, well, pretty much every aspect of life.
And the tools we've discussed, PAVE for spotting those risks, team for managing them. They give you this structured, practical way to handle uncertainty and make smarter choices no matter what you're doing.
Totally agree. We've been talking about aviation training, but the core principles, identifying potential hazards, thinking about how likely and severe they are, then taking steps to mitigate them, those apply everywhere.
To anything, really. Whether you're planning a huge project at work, making financial decisions, even figuring out how to spend your weekend, understanding these concepts can help you navigate those potential pitfalls.
And with that in mind, here's something to ponder. Think back to a decision you made recently. Big or small, doesn't matter. How would using these frameworks, these PAVE and team approaches, how might they have shifted your perspective? Maybe even changed the outcome?
We encourage you to start incorporating these principles into your everyday life, even if it's just intuitively. It's a powerful way to make more informed and, ultimately, safer choices.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.